Hello, everybody. My name is Jarrett Way. I'm here with Mindy Avithia from Mighty Citizen. This webinar was one that we did live yesterday. We had a lot of great participants, a lot of engagement. Unfortunately, we accidentally did not record it, and we don't want to leave everybody hanging. We were wanting to send this out here shortly. So we're doing a quick re-record, myself and Mindy. So we're just going to jump right into it. Welcome to How to Create and Repurpose Content More Efficiently, the on-demand webinar. Yesterday, I started with this great auction, a little activity, just an icebreaker for everybody. I just wanted to go through a few items to make an example. I went through these three items that you see here. This first one is this Hellmann's jar of mayonnaise, very small one. And I was just asking the room, taking a quick gauge to see how much everyone would pay for these items. So there's just a penny here, just to show scale, not necessarily its worth, but you can go through these three items. We have this next one, the psychedelic bear guy. Again, another penny just for scale, not for worth, trying to see how much everyone would pay for it. And then third, we have this egg whisk. Yes, this is a whisk that looks like an egg designed to beat other eggs. It's quite cruel. People were not going for it, not wanting to pay too much for it. Some said that we couldn't pay them enough to take this item home. So that was noted. And I went through all of these to make a quick example and tell this story about eBay. So back in 2009, there was this journalist named Rob Walker, and he bought 200 items from eBay, very similar to the ones that I just showed you. And the average price for all of those items was about 65 cents per item. So then he went and asked 200 of his friends to write a description for each of those items that he purchased off eBay. And then he went and re-uploaded all 200 of those items back to eBay with their new descriptions, talking about what they are, giving them a story. So he put all 200 items back up, and what he sold them for was a whopping $8,000. And you may be asking, how did he do that? Well, the only difference was that he included content, right? So he was able to sell all those items for about $8,000. And that was about a 2,800% profit on all of that thrift store junk, if you will. So the only difference was the content, the story, the description that went along with it. And I make this point clearly to say that content can do wonders for your organization. It really can work wonders for your organization. And we are going to talk a lot about that today. If anyone was curious, here are the actual prices for what those items sold for. The Hellmann mayonnaise jar, $51. Our little bear friend at $25. And then our cruel egg whisk for a whopping $30, which I would have paid a lot more for that personally. Again, my name is Jarrett Way. I am the Senior Marketing Manager here at Mighty Citizen. A strength of mine is storytelling. I love storytelling. I have been able to do it all throughout my career for different organizations. And I'm thrilled to be here at Mighty Citizen to be able to tell the story of Mighty Citizen and help empower all the mission-driven organizations that we work with. A weakness of mine are breakfast tacos. You may know something about Austin, even though I don't live there anymore. I now live in LA. But even here a little bit, breakfast tacos are like currency, especially in Austin. And I still feel like a very, very rich man. Mindy, I'll turn it over to you for your intro.
Yeah, getting a little ahead of myself there. Sorry about that. Hello, I'm Mindy Avithia. I'm Mighty Citizen Senior Events and Marketing Manager. My strength is definitely party planning. I love a good dinner party with friends. And a weakness is going to be my daughter Olive's hugs. They're like little dopamine doses, and I love them. Can't get enough. So who is Mighty Citizen? Let's get into that. We are a branding and digital transformation agency based out of Austin with team members all over the country. We serve mission-driven organizations, so that can be nonprofits, associations, higher education, and government agencies. And some of our services include things like web development, research and analytics, brand development and brand strategy, creating marketing strategy and campaigns, and of course, defining the user experience and content strategy, which we'll be talking a little bit about today.
So we are thankful for all of you who are watching this on demand. By the end of this presentation, Mindy and I want you to be able to do a few things. The first of which is to make a clear, compelling case for investing in more content creation, put simply. Secondly, we want you to form your very own content squad. I'm going to talk about kind of the two sides of the one content creation coin and everyone that's represented there. Third, we want you to develop a system to reuse and repurpose content efficiently. So not only telling you, what content to surface, how to surface it, even if you are already surfacing content, How are you going to repurpose that content to be really efficient so you're not spinning the wheel and doing a lot more work than you really need to be doing? Lastly, we want you to be able to create valuable content for your audiences. And we'll talk about why we say valuable here in just a minute. Now, yesterday I took a temperature of the room and I wanted to hear a few things. And Mindy, we can just show all of these right now. I wanted to hear if anybody currently, if they found the idea of becoming a content publisher daunting or stressful. A lot of people said yes, some no's, but a lot of people overwhelmingly, and they're in the right place, find content publishing to be daunting or stressful. We also wanted to know if our participants had a blog currently. So if they were currently operationalizing a blog for the organization. And then also we wanted to know if they currently are publishing more than 4 pieces of content per month. That doesn't necessarily have to be on that blog. It could be 4 pieces of content, however you define it. But many people said yes, a few people said no. Pretty split number, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And then lastly, if they've published a video this year. And I was surprised to see a lot of people have already published a video this year, but there were still quite a few no's as well. And we'll circle back on all of this. But first, I want to present you with a thesis that I have. And that is that you need to create a lot more valuable, beautiful content than you are right now. Again, you need to create a lot more valuable, beautiful content than you are right now. And I use those 2 adjectives very intentionally. I say valuable because your content needs to be helpful, right? It needs to be useful. It needs to provide value, real value for your audiences. A lot of people are publishing content that isn't necessarily valuable. So if you know what's valuable for your audiences, you should be absolutely publishing that. And then I say beautiful because good design is no longer a luxury. It's really the cost of entry nowadays. So your content should look visually just as good as it is, just as valuable as it is for your audiences. So valuable and beautiful, and that is my thesis. Now, I'd love to turn it back over to Mindy to talk about some of the challenges of content creation for mission-driven organizations.
Yeah, as many of you know all too well, mission-driven organizations have unique challenges, and some of them can be things like there's sometimes an obligation to focus on where the money is coming from instead of the mission and the value you're bringing. And that can look like hero stories of donors instead of authentic stories about clients, or sponsorship stories for associations instead of member success stories. Another reason it's a challenge is that your target audience can be too broad. While we want everyone to donate or join our cause or become a member or become a student, it's not realistic. So honing in on your target audience is important. And lastly, the lack of digital marketing experience can really inhibit your case for creating more content, especially if people aren't engaging with it. If you're not seeing the return on investment, it's hard to convince leadership to invest in more content. So we're going to tackle these today and hopefully address some of them for you and your organization. And with that, I want to talk about 4 reasons you should create more content. And, sometimes it's not always the amount of content we create, but the value it brings. And often the more content we create, the more value we bring. And so one of the reasons to create more content is to become an actual thought leader. The idea of becoming a thought leader is a very popular term. It's nearly impossible to measure accurately. Saying you're a thought leader is like saying you're a marathon runner, but if you didn't actually run those 26 miles and change, then you're not, no matter what you say. And another reason is that good, valuable content allows people to evaluate the quality of your ideas before they even talk to someone at your organization. And this ultimately reduces the mental pull because when you have the clout of being a trusted and reliable organization, then your prospects can trust that you'll help them achieve the goals they're looking to achieve without them having to do their own research. And here's a pro tip from my girl Moira Rose to align yourself with other groups with a trusted reputation. This is especially important when it comes to your funders. What are your funding partners' reputation? If it's a good one, it'll help boost your credibility. And if it's a bad one, it may hurt your credibility and your brand. A great example here would be a recent Miami Dolphin NFL player donated to a local nonprofit here in Austin, the Austin Pets Alive. It's a small animal shelter, and they didn't even have to post about it on their social. I'm not sure, I'm not on their email list. I'm not sure if they sent out an email about it, but they didn't post it on their Instagram account. but they had enough earned media that it really bolstered their brand and aligned them with a large organization. Another reason to create more content is that it's going to drive more online traffic to your site. And your site is honestly, it's the biggest salesperson or development person if you're a nonprofit. And more online traffic equals more conversions. You want to think of your content as an ecosystem. It's all working together to achieve your strategic goals. And of course, if you invest in a flexible website design so you can have control over your content, this is usually a more cost-effective way to manage your content. And flexibility has a lot to do with the CMS you choose. You don't want to rely on third-party vendors to make small updates to your website when you can do it yourself. A pro tip here is keyword research. It can really help you create content you know your audience is already interested in and engaging with. It does take a little bit of a lift in someone with basic SEO knowledge, but there are affordable options to find low-hanging keywords that can really help you stand out amongst competitors. A third reason to create more content is that you want to stay top of mind. So you think about your organization 40 plus hours a week. And your audience, they may think about your organization 0 hours a week. Some people, they're not thinking about it at all. And we have this conversation at Mighty Citizen a lot. Have we used this asset too much? Do we need to update this web page? Are people sick of seeing this thing? And the conclusion we typically come to is that we are the ones that are seeing it over and over and over, not our audiences. And so really think about the frequency of your content. You engage with it every day, and most people do not. So seeing it even multiple times is okay, I promise. Pro tip here is share your content more often than you should. Sometimes it takes 5 to 7 touch points for someone to just donate $5 and even more to become a member. If your content is valuable, it's okay to share it a lot. And the fourth reason to create more content that I want to talk about is that we want to defeat the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge says that once you know something, it's impossible to imagine what it was like to not know that thing. And there's a great experiment where you can prove this. If you go home tonight to your kids or your partner or your friends, your neighbors, whoever, try this little experiment. Tap out the Star Spangled Banner on your table with your knuckles, your fingertips, whatever. Don't hum it, don't sing it, and don't tell them what you're doing. Just tap it out and then ask them if they know what song it is. And 100% guaranteed they are not going to know what song it is. And that's the curse of knowledge at play. While you're tapping, you have the knowledge, you have the context, and you can almost hear the song playing in your head. But because they don't have the context or the reference or the experience, they don't know. So content marketing is a way for us to sort of circumvent, to some extent, the curse of knowledge, in part because as we create more, we learn more about what resonates with our audiences and what doesn't. And we have to learn that over and over again. It's constantly learning. We may know something very well because we are in the weeds every day, again, 40 plus hours a week. But the average person engaging with your brand is just like your friend who has no idea what you're tapping to. And a good example of this is highlighting a member story without adding in why that person is a member, how they came to be one, or why they chose your organization. When we're marketing something, people like to see themselves in our stories. And a pro tip here is if you're unsure your content will resonate, run it by a third party. You should always be considering your audience and how they'll understand your content before you publish it for the masses. If you don't have a great idea right now of any curse of knowledge at play in your organization, have someone from another department, your family member, friend, whatever, read it first and provide feedback. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jarrett to talk about how to recruit your content team.
Thank you, Mindy. So I mentioned earlier about your content squad or your content team that I'd be talking a little bit about it. And like I said, it is two sides of the same content coin. So you have first your subject matter experts, and then you also have your content owners. So Mindy, we can pop over to that first subject matter expert slide. So your subject matter experts, or your SMEs, as I'll say, these are the people who constitute most of your staff and your volunteers. They're the people who are providing the facts and the feedback. However, a lot of organizations make the mistake of ceding authority over the content itself to the SMEs, which is not a good idea. And we're going to talk about why. On the other side of the coin, we have our content owners. So these are the people who are responsible for bringing that content to your audiences. They're not usually the facts people as well. But the facts people aren't specialists in how to format and display content for maximum impact. So think about it this way. Your content owners are specialists themselves in creating, formatting, and publishing your content, just like your SMEs are specialists in their own fields. Don't let the content get created by committee here. Your content owners need subject matter experts to provide that substance for them and the insights and the detail, but the SMEs do not determine how that content looks, how it feels, or even how it's managed. I have to make the point very clear that you need both of these people, the same two sides of the same content coin. You need these staff members to work together to have a well-oiled machine and be able to produce some good content. So you've heard a lot from us about, producing content, what it takes, all these different components. You might be thinking, we're a one-person team, we're a one-man, one-woman team. This is not something that we have a ton of resources to do. So if you're balling on a budget here, I want to talk about some content marketing on a budget and what you can do, as a lot of mission-driven organizations are in that same boat. The very first point that I want to make is that you must hire a great writer. You must hire a great writer. If you have two candidates that are exactly the same virtually and everything else, always hire the candidate that is the better writer. Always hire the candidate that is a better writer. I cannot say it enough because it will pay dividends tenfold over time for your organization. By the way, we have this Mighty GPS tool that we've developed last year and launched last year, rather. That is a self-assessment for marketing maturity. I'll get into that a little bit later. But what I want to tell you right now is that 37% of the hundreds of respondents of mission-driven organizations that took our assessment say that they've never hired an experienced writer to write their content, or they have never hired an experienced writer to write their content. Investing in a great writer can really separate you from the herd. A strong human writer has the power to captivate an audience through original storytelling and actually capturing that emotion. And evoking that emotion is something that you have to be able to do. It's putting things into a personal perspective, a social or a cultural context even. It's providing that critical thinking that we want out of our readers. And that's something that artificial intelligence or AI just cannot do yet. And we will certainly get into that in just a little bit. Secondly, I want to make the point about quantity over quality. You might be hearing that and thinking, Jared, isn't it the other way around? But it really isn't. I would argue that this is another quick way to really just compete with a gut of content that is out there, just all that noise, to compete with it through the sheer quantity of your content. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that your quality should suffer, but again, you should be putting out your content frequently. And like Mindy said, the point she made earlier, it may feel like it's too much, but really it's not going to be too much. Your audiences aren't thinking about it as much as you are. Now, back to the quality piece. Of course, you're not going to put anything out that's off brand or below the quality that you're used to, or something that has a bunch of typos, or something that requires a bunch of workflows that you'll need to build in order to make sure it's firing off. But again, you'll have that minimum standard of quality no matter what, but always be thinking about the quantity of the content you're pushing out, especially for smaller teams, quantity over quality for sure. Third point I want to make is about video. Y'all, video is cheap. The barrier to entry for video, this is what I mean by that. The barrier to entry for video is just low, especially after the main pandemic years, still the residual of that. People are working in remote environments. We're used to seeing people's backgrounds, people's living rooms behind them, whatever it might be. There's just not a very high expectation of quality, of production quality anymore. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do it, but you shouldn't be afraid of doing it because it's not going to be perfect or look the best. We've produced a lot of Mighty Citizens videos with this exact cell phone right here. And of course, we're always looking to make sure it's more quality, and you can do that on a cell phone, but always be thinking that you don't want to not do something just because it's not going to be perfect at first. So video is cheap, and you can float video content pretty easily in your organizations, especially if you're one of those smaller teams or even a bigger team that's really good at developing relationships outside of your department or outside of your organization or just outside of your day-to-day. A lot of those people that you're developing those relationships with would be happy to sit in front of a camera and talk about those exact same things that you talk about them with day in and day out. And that is great video content that you could be missing in your organization. Just a few other points I want to make is to use the resources you already have. Like I said, there are people out there for video content that you can interview, that you can get behind a camera that would be happy to do it. Think critically about the resources that you have at your disposal. It may not be obvious to you at first. And then use inexpensive tools as well. There are a lot of free tools out there at your disposal that you can use to really bolster your content marketing. So I encourage you to do so. And I think
Yeah,
maybe
and
pulse check.
yeah, this was where we had a nice pulse check yesterday, a lot of engaging questions. And luckily, we didn't record, but we did save some of the questions. So we're going to re-answer those. And I'm going to shoot them over to Jarrett. So one of them is that someone said, our audience is doctors. Their time is sparse. That's what, and the what's in it for them is key, short and relevant. How do we engage them?
Yeah. I mean, you're halfway there. You know a big thing about your audiences. They're mainly doctors. They don't have a lot of time to sit and read long form content. And a lot of organizations would really die to have that kind of information about their audiences. And you have it. You know it because that is a specific audience. So I would say push your content to where they're going to see it and where they're going to read it. If it's short, quippy content that exists on social media, if it's quick video, bites, these sound bites that you can get multimedia elements up for quickly, do that. Infographics, do that, as opposed to this long form content that they're not going to read. So I would say you're halfway there, and continue to test everything that you're doing as well to make sure that it is resonating for your audiences in the way that you think it will.
Yeah, agree 100%. And another question was, how would you define content that is good enough to post, but might not be in itself great? Do you feel that that might harm reputation?
Hmm. I'll make the same point I just made on video about the video, and that's don't let, you know, perfection be the enemy of progress, right? It's not going to be perfect immediately. Nothing that you put out is going to be perfect, but I'm willing to bet that it will meet that minimum standard of quality that you have for yourself. You can, rewrite something a million times over, and it's never going to be perfect, but it will be good enough to accomplish what you want it to accomplish for your audiences. So don't be afraid to put it out there just because it's not going to be stellar. We certainly are not publishing, home runs every single week, right? Of all the content that we're putting out, all the content that I'm developing day to day, I know that not everything that we publish is going to be a home run. But we're testing. We're trying to see what's new, what's resonating for our audiences, and you should be doing the same. So think about it through that lens. You don't want to really hinder yourself because it's not going to be the very, very best perfection that you think it should be.
Yeah. And then one more question before we continue. Should content be published to only social media, or should it also be published via email?
I think it depends on your audience. Similar to that first question, if you know that your audiences are maybe your email list is just a really great resource for you all to be able to disseminate content, use that. That's something that you know about yourselves. If you're not on the social space, but you think you might want to be, start testing, kind of repurposing that content into kind of more social media friendly content. And Mindy will talk about that a little bit later. But your audiences exist somewhere, and you know that way better than we do, unless you hire us. But it's something that you know about your audiences, where they exist, how they're engaging. If you want to test something new, then you should be testing that. Kind of get the analytics side of it going, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, you should be able to really find out where your audiences already are and where they're already engaging with you, and leverage that.
Absolutely. So with that, let's kind of continue and talk about how to find content.
Yeah, so you've heard a lot from us already, and maybe right now you're thinking, well, how do you find this content within our organization? Before we go any further, let's go ahead and have the conversation about artificial intelligence, or AI, specifically copywriting tools for AI, and maybe more specifically the Chat GPT, which I'm sure we've all heard about. I'm sure I'm not putting this on your radar by any means, but these are tools that are coming down the line, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention them because they are powerful. They can be useful. But let's talk about it in the context of maybe copywriting. And I have some opinions here. And really, that is that effective copywriting will always require a human. It will always require that emotional appeal, right? Humans by nature are just creatures of emotion. So anyone's decision to interact or engage with your organization is always an extremely emotional one, whether that's to donate, to enroll, to become a member, anything like that, to be a constituent of you. It's always a very emotional decision. And AI can be a good supplemental tool for copywriting, but it is not a one-for-one replacement. Human oversight will always be necessary to create that nuance required to meet the moment every single time. I think as time goes on, it will be a little bit more obvious to us when things like copywriting and other arts, if you will, are entirely replaced by AI in whatever circumstance, just because we'll be able to tell that human touch is so intrinsic in my eyes. So it may be duplicated in strings of words, but it can never, ever be duplicated in feeling, in my opinion. Mindy, anything there?
Yeah, I agree. And if you look right now, AI hasn't quite figured out how to generate people very well. So if you look at their fingers, you can always tell if it's an AI generated image. There's always like six fingers or, you know, it's very strange. So always look at the fingers for now. But I agree. I think AI writing tools can be extremely useful in helping to generate ideas, but I have yet to find it to be more useful than a simple Google search. And while the technology is impressive and gonna get better, at the end of the day, AI isn't human, like Jarrett said. It doesn't know how to tell a story that will really move someone yet. And even with the proper inputs, I don't believe it's there. So I don't think that this GIF is at all true. ChatGPT isn't all we need as communicators and storytellers. And with that, I think we should talk about how to create some great stories.
Andy, real quick, I think you made a really good point when we did this yesterday about someone being asked to describe like holding their child for the first time. Do you want to
Oh
do?
yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, I was on LinkedIn and I was reading a guy posted about how he asked ChatGPT to describe what it's like to hold your child for the first time. And ChatGPT was very boring. It was like, it was the most magical moment of my life. It made me so happy. The nurse placed him in my arms and I was in love. And, you know, very elementary, very boring. And then he wrote the experience from his point of view. It was very poignant. It was chock full of all the emotions that it's like to really hold your child for the first time. And it included dialogue and descriptions. And, it just really showed me in context how AI just can't emulate the human experience. And I hope it doesn't ever.
Thanks, Mindy. All right, I want to talk about some certain plot points that you can use for your content. And I like to say that these plot points, these three that I'm about to show you, just can never fail. People will never get tired of them. The first plot point is the David versus Goliath plot point. That is a classic plot. It's one that's very common. I want you to think about the underdogs, right? It's the rags to riches stories of triumph, of sheer willpower. The David versus Goliath plot tells the story of someone overcoming incredible odds to win the day. So for a lot of mission-oriented, mission-focused, mission-driven organizations, it's really easy to find this type of content. A lot of for-profit companies struggle here, and it's a little bit tougher for them. But I'm willing to bet that for all of you mission-driven organizations watching this, you're probably brimming, full of stories that you can tell that fit this classic plot point of David versus Goliath. Again, the details won't change here. The people will change. It's the same plot. So no one is ever going to come to you and say, I don't want to engage with you, or I don't want to do business, or I don't want to send my kid to your school, or I don't want to join your organization or donate to your cause because you keep telling these underdog stories. You're never going to hear that because it just won't happen. So use the David versus Goliath plot point because it sticks. The second one is the odd couples plot. This is also known as the connection plot. And this shows how a massive gap is bridged between two different groups of people, right? This is why we can watch YouTube videos of cats riding on the backs of turtles for 10 minutes straight. We love stories of two people or groups bridging some sort of big gap between them. And that gap can be a lot of things. It can be geographical. In this image here, it's between species, right? They can be based on gender or ethnicity or socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, education, points of view, whatever it might be. We love when people who shouldn't initially come together do so, and they come together to pursue something greater than they both could on their own or greater than themselves. We see this plot point a lot in university settings where we see stories of these professors and these students sort of bridging a sort of gap to do something greater. And often differences between organizations even that team up to do something bigger than themselves is something that can be really wonderful. So think about the odd couples plot or the connection plot. I'm always so curious what this dog and these donkeys are up to. Lastly, we have the MacGyver plot, also known as the creativity plot. It is about someone making a mental breakthrough, right? Or solving a long-standing puzzle that's in front of them. If you remember, MacGyver was a pretty popular TV show back in the 80s and 90s. And he was someone who could do a lot with a little, right? He can make an explosive out of toothpaste and a paperclip if he wanted to. He was always coming up with these new contraptions at the very last second. And the point here is that we love stories about people who use that innovation or that new thinking or finding a loophole in the system to do something new or to do something old in a new way. Think about the story of Isaac Newton with the apple falling on his head and discovering gravity. And while that's probably not a true story, we love that story because we love hearing stories of people or groups who are suddenly or trying something new in a different way to accomplish something new. So look for those 3 plot points. They truly never fail, and they exist all sorts of ways within your organization. I'm also willing to bet that you probably have a team meeting every single week to kind of float these stories potentially, or maybe you're meeting for something else and you can use that time to start talking about how to float these stories within your organization. And when you have that meeting, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. The first of which is, whom did we turn away last week? So who did you turn away last week? You turned them away for a reason, right? I'm sure it was a good reason, but whatever that reason was, you need to figure out the why, right? And why there's someone who could be part of a great story for your organization, because there is a story there, most likely. So ask those follow-up questions, but always start with that question. Who did we turn away last week? Secondly is, who can't we forget? So this can be someone like a client or a donor or a member or a student or a constituent. Someone is sticking in your head for one reason or another. And the big question there is why? Why are they sticking in our heads? Because there's a story there and there's a reason they're sticking in your head. And that's the story that you can float. So always thinking about that as a source of content. Who can't we forget this week? Lastly is, who's our favorite person or client currently? So this can be a donor, a volunteer, a student, or a member, or faculty, whatever it is. Who's the person that you just love for one reason or another? And by the way, that can be someone from your staff. That's totally fine. Float that story. But always ask your question, why do we like them so much? Why are we thinking about them? Why are they our favorite? And again, there's content there. There's absolutely a story there. So much of the content that we see nowadays from organizations are these big white papers or these big research reports. And those are great and they serve a purpose, but to make the most compelling stories, you have to add that human element into them. Like we said, humans are very emotional creatures, and that's how we want your audiences to respond to your content. So make your claims, do your thing, but always share your data through the lens of a story. I cannot say that enough. Mindy?
Yeah, so with that, I want to talk about creating a system of repurposing all of this really great content that we've created and found. And this is my favorite quote ever. I love this quote from James Clear. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So, in other words, it doesn't matter how ambitious your goals are. If you don't have the systems in place to achieve those goals, they're not going to come to fruition. So, let's talk about setting up systems. Here's an example of a high-level system of creating content, and most content creators and marketing professionals understand this. You create a long-form piece of content, and then you break it down into shorter forms, and then you distribute it on your preferred channels like social media, your email, blog, etc. But now what? What's going on? Are these fish going to get in the water? And we
I
don't
love
really talk. Yeah.
it.
I love it. I love it. We don't really talk about what to do after you've created that great piece of content. You've got the long form, you broke it down into articles and other quick pieces of content, and you've shared it on social, email, your blog, everything. But now what do you do with it? It's good, valuable content, and some of it is evergreen and can be used for a long time, maybe even years, some content. So we have to build a system of repurposing. And here's an example I adapted from our own content strategy. Every year, we meet for a planning session where we develop our entire marketing plan for the year, and inclusive of that is our current content strategy, which Jarrett heads up. Here, we map out exactly what we'll be creating, who we'll be targeting, and what those campaigns will look like. Adding in some ways to repurpose your content will ensure that you're creating efficiencies from the strategy level all the way down to its execution. This, I just want to remind you, is a high-level document that informs our editorial calendar. It doesn't, you don't come back to it all the time. It's something that lives there that will inform the day-to-day calendar that you're into. And so with that, let's look at how we actually ensure the content strategy is executed on. Using tools like this, our editorial calendar template, you can plan for when and how often you'd like to share your content. This is an example of our mighty nonprofit organization, which totally does not exist, but we'll pretend. This creates a system of planning, creating, and repurposing so we can know that when we're distributing our content at the most valuable and appropriate times. And according to organizations who've taken our marketing maturity assessment, the Mighty GPS, 47% say their organization only sometimes maintains a content plan or editorial calendar, which is bonkers to me. Regularly maintaining a content plan and editorial calendar keeps your annual content strategy on track and helps you drive your marketing goals by organizing all the content you publish throughout the year, and ultimately creates a more efficient system for creating and repurposing. The Real Mighty Citizen team actually does use this same exact template. Jarrett creates the detailed content strategy, like we showed before, each year, and then manages this document. And each week, we discuss our upcoming content, what needs to be done next. In order to successfully repurpose content, you can track where you are in its development and note when you've posted or when you need to post about it, and carry it over into the next months or quarters when necessary. I think we talked about, Jarrett, you going over this same exact template hundreds of times because you've been at Mighty Citizen for years.
Yeah, are we
So
meeting? I feel like it has to be at least hundreds of times.
yeah, I
It's our system.
mean, yeah, it shows that we have a strong system. And so, the ugly truth is that I wish there was a silver bullet to tell you the exact amount of time something needs to be resurfaced. But the truth is, each organization and industry is unique, and the types of repurposed content will be unique too. I wish I could say there was this formula that you should post on LinkedIn this many times and Instagram this many times and create this many reels, but it's just not true, and I'd be lying. It's not about following a specific formula, it's about setting up a system that allows you to be efficient and organized when you plan, create, and repurpose. And to just wrap that all up in a bow, you want to reiterate, or I want to reiterate that you always start with a strategy and then build an editorial calendar that works for you. Maintain it regularly and keep track of the status of the content you create and how often you share it. And I think we're getting down to the wire now.
Yeah,
So yeah, to sum up the presentation, you are in the business of content creation now because it's the surest way of connecting with your users and audiences at scale. And you need to invest in at least one great writer. It doesn't have to be solely a copywriter. Like Jarrett said, it can be somebody who is great for the position, but always hire that better writer because it will pay dividends moving forward. And then build content idea generation into your operations. And lastly, create and maintain a sustainable system that allows you to achieve your content goals.
real quick, I'd be remiss, and we've mentioned it just a couple of times in this presentation, if I didn't talk about the Mighty GPS, which is our 10-minute self-assessment to measure your organization's marketing maturity or marketing effectiveness, rather. You can see it right at the mightygps.com. This is an assessment that we have been working on for years. We finally launched it last year. Hundreds of mission-driven organizations have taken it to see where they stand in their marketing maturity or their marketing effectiveness. So when you take our assessment, you'll receive an overall marketing maturity score and a stage for your organization. You'll also receive a score across 6 categories, 6 key categories of marketing. And we've determined all of those one of those we know is UX design and content, which is what we're talking about in this presentation. You'll also receive in your inbox immediately after taking this assessment a customized report with steps for each category to help you move into the next stage of marketing maturity. So some real actionable ways that you can improve, and will identify these opportunities and areas for improvement based on your assessment. So organizations are averaging around 6-7 minutes to take this thing. It is absolutely free to all of you to take. We're very excited about it. And we're actually going to be releasing our first benchmarking report based on our 2022 findings from the Mighty GPS with the hundreds of organizations just like yours that have taken it. So you can really see how you stack up against all of them. But obviously, we want this to be a tool that you can use internally year to year to really just improve across 6 key categories of marketing and communication. So that is the Mighty GPS. Very excited to share that all with you. You can go to themightygps.com and take a look.
Great. And with that, I think we have 2 more questions that we can answer from yesterday, if you're up for it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So one of them was, does Mighty Citizen have a best practice to share for updating old blog posts?
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation for us, and it all goes back to this idea of content governance, which we may have mentioned once or twice in this presentation. Shortly, content governance is really accounting for every step of the publishing process, but especially what happens after a piece of content is published. A lot of us are pushing out content that has a bunch of links in it, a bunch of data in it that could be easily outdated, especially if that's just the nature of your industry, especially. So I always say, get a spreadsheet together. We have one at Mighty Citizen. It is truly just a content inventory document. It is an Excel spreadsheet. It has every piece of content that we publish. It also has any links, any things to note about it, maybe just the overall topic or idea, maybe specific pieces of data or points of data, or just links that we know will need to be updated at some point. One that I can think of right off the top of my head is all of the content we have surrounding Google Analytics. With GA4 coming down the line, there's lots of stages of updating that needs to happen for that. So a document like that, a content inventory document, would really help you. I'm just kind of keep an eye on everything from a 30,000-foot view.
Yeah. And then our final question, which was a favorite yesterday, how do you manage power struggles over who gets a seat at the content owner table?
I'm so curious, like what that power struggle looks like.
I know, right? Like, what's the tea there?
Yeah, but hey, that's the reality for some of you. I think what I mentioned yesterday is, maybe there's a silver lining there. It's not a bad thing to have more than one person involved in the content process, but you should have, like Mindy said, your systems in place, right? You have your subject matter experts, you have your content owners. There can be really one person managing the entire publishing process, checking on every single part of it. Now, at Mighty Citizen, that person is me, but there's never a piece of content that we put out that Minnie doesn't see, and or Bree, our director of marketing for the brand, doesn't see as well. So it's not me calling all the shots, and it's a silver lining, I say, because that person can still be just as involved, but maybe not calling those types of shots, but still involved in the actually editing, publishing process, the content governance of it all. So if there is a power struggle, it sounds like you just need a system, because it sounds like you don't have one quite yet. So put a system in place to really delineate and see who needs to be doing what. And then you can move forward from there with some better understanding.
Yeah, amen. And with that, I think we're going to end it for today. Thank you, everyone, for watching this on-demand webinar, and we're happy to re-record it for y'all. And until next time.
Couldn't leave you hanging.
Couldn't
Thanks,
leave you
everybody.
hanging. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.